with, "Mom, I messed up," crying and sobbing continually. Not thinking twice, I asked her again, "Okay, what happened?" Suddenly, a man's voice barked at her, "Lay down, put your head back." At that moment, I started to panic. My concern escalated as I demanded to know what was going on, but nothing could have prepared me for her response that she gave me next. "Mom, these bad men have me. Help me, help me, help me," she begged and pleaded as the phone was taken from her. A threatening and vulgar man took the call over. "Listen here, I have your daughter. You call anybody, you call the police. I'm going to pop her stomach so full of drugs, I'm going to have my way with her. I'm going to drop her in Mexico, and you'll never see your daughter again." It wasn't just her voice. It was her cries. It was her sobs. It was just not her voice. How did they get her voice? How did they get her crying, her sobs that are unique to her? She's not a very public person. I was wondering, are we being cyber-stalked, targeted? So many questions.
And Ms. DeStefano, we'll begin, please, with your opening statement. You'll see some lights indicating time, but we want to make sure you have time to tell your whole story. So don't worry too much about the clock. We're eager to hear from you, and you may begin.
Thank you so much, Senator. I appreciate that. Good afternoon, Senators. It is my great honor to speak with you today and share my experience on how artificial intelligence is being weaponized to not only invoke fear and terror in the American public, but in the global community at large, as it capitalizes on and redefines what we have known as familiar. I would like to take this moment to thank Senator Ossoff for inviting me to be here today, and I'd also like to thank Senator Blackburn for your concern on this ever-evolving topic and community threat. AI is revolutionizing and unraveling the very foundation of our social fabric by creating doubt and fear in what was once never questioned, the sound of a loved one's voice. What is familiar? How many times have you received a phone call from your child and asked them to verify who is calling? How many times has a loved one reached out to you in despair and you stopped them to validate their identity? Did you hang up on them? Did you require to call them back to make sure you're speaking to the correct person? The answer is more than likely never. The sound of a loved one's voice is often never authenticated. It is a unique identity, as unique as a fingerprint. This familiar identity is innate. It is designed by God. It is what binds a mother to their child and a newborn infant to their mother. January 20th was a typical Friday afternoon for our family, kicking off a weekend of races and rehearsals. We often divide our family across the state. It's divide and conquer. My husband was with our older daughter, Bree, training for a ski race, and I was with my younger daughter, Aubrey, picking her up from a rehearsal at dance. Bree had not raced in years and promised me that she would take it easy. At about 4:53 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number upon exiting my car. At the final ring, I chose to answer it, as unknown calls we're very familiar with can often be a hospital or a doctor. It was Brianna sobbing and crying, saying, "Mom." At first, I thought nothing of it and casually asked her what happened. On the phone, I had the phone on speaker, walking through the parking lot to meet her sister. Brianna continued with, "Mom, I messed up," crying and sobbing continually. Not thinking twice, I asked her again, "Okay, what happened?" Suddenly, a man's voice barked at her, "Lay down, put your head back." At that moment, I started to panic. My concern escalated as I demanded to know what was going on, but nothing could have prepared me for her response that she gave me next. "Mom, these bad men have me. Help me, help me, help me," she begged and pleaded as the phone was taken from her. A threatening and vulgar man took the call over. "Listen here, I have your daughter. You call anybody, you call the police. I'm going to pop her stomach so full of drugs, I'm going to have my way with her. I'm going to drop her in Mexico, and you'll never see your daughter again." As I had my hand shaking on the door handle of the dance studio, I ran inside and started screaming for help. The next few minutes were every parent's worst nightmare. I was fortunate to have a couple of moms there who knew me well, and they instantly went to action. One mom ran outside and called 911. My younger daughter, Aubrey, was standing there listening to all the vulgar threats this man was making that he was going to do to her sister. I needed her help and asked her to start calling her dad, call her brothers, call anybody. We have to find her sister. She stood there paralyzed in fear. The second mom ran to Aubrey's aid and started making calls to her dad. The kidnapper demanded $1 million. That was not possible. So then he decided on $50,000 in cash. That was when the first mom came back in and told me that 911 is very familiar with an AI scam where they can use someone's voice. But I didn't process that. It wasn't just her voice. It was her cries. It was her sobs. It was just not her voice. She said okay and left. I continued with the negotiations for the ransom. I asked them for wiring instructions, routing numbers, but they refused. Instead, they required me to get in a van with a bag over my head with $50,000 in cash to be transported to my daughter. If I didn't have all the money, then we were both going to be dead. I was shocked. At that point in time, the second mom came back to me, and she had located my husband, who had found Bree resting safely in bed. She came to me and told me that Brianna was safe, but I did not believe her because I had just spoken to my daughter, and I was very sure of her voice, and I was very sure of her cries. So I demanded to talk to my daughter. Brianna got on the phone, and she had no idea what was going on, and she kept reassuring me that she was safe. I asked her so many times, are you sure? Are you sure you're safe? Are you sure you're with Dad? I spoke to you. How can you be in both places at once? I asked her over and over again. My mind was whirling. When I finally had the reassurance I needed, I knew she was safe, and I was furious. I lashed at the men for the horrible attempt to scam and extort money. They continued to threaten to kill Bree. I made a promise that I was going to stop them, and they were never going to hurt my daughter nor anybody else again. At that point, I hung up and collapsed to the floor in tears of relief. I called the police to pursue the matter, and unfortunately I was met with it was a prank call, that it happens often, and that there's nothing that can be done, and that I probably am not in harm's way, but it's not a guarantee. They offered to have a police officer contact me, again from an unknown number, as authorities are calling from blocked numbers, but that's all they could offer. That certainly did not make me feel better. The bottom line was no actual crime had been committed, so no physical kidnapping had taken place and no money had transferred, period, the end. But that wasn't the end. It couldn't be the end. If it was the end, then how would this nightmare ever stop? I stayed up all night paralyzed in fear. Do they know where I am? Do they know where my daughter is? How did they get her voice? How did they get her crying, her sobs that are unique to her? She's not a very public person. I was wondering, are we being cyber-stalked, targeted? So many questions that were left unanswered. So I turned to the community, and the responses were overwhelming. Friends and neighbors came out of the woodwork with their stories. Kidnapping phone calls coming from their children's phones, bags of money being driven halfway to Mexico, even voices of young children nowhere to be found on social media who do not have phones. The stories kept pouring in. My own mother even received a phone call at my brother's voice, claiming to be in an accident and needing money for a hospital bill. The common response that victims received from authorities when reported was that nothing could be done. In fact, one mother I know personally shared with me how she was even mocked by her son's school and a security officer. The caller even used her son's unique nickname to self-identify. Fortunately, he was safe in class, and she was told this happens all the time, as her fear was dismissed. Money scams have been around for thousands of years. This is entirely different. This is terrorizing with lasting trauma. Even months later, sharing the story makes me shake to my core. Aubrey was approached by a boy to hang out sometime, and she concluded it was because he wants to kidnap her. That's not a normal 13-year-old thought. It was my daughter's voice. It was her cries. It was her sobs. It was the way she spoke. I will never be able to shake that voice and the desperate cries for help out of my mind. It's every parent's worst nightmare to hear your child pleading with fear and pain, knowing that they are being harmed and that you're helpless. The longer this form of terror remains unpunishable, the farther and more egregious it will become. There is no limit to the depth of evil AI can enable. The thought crossed my mind before I hung up on the kidnappers to follow through with a physical abduction of me. Was that what it would take to bring this to an end? Was that what it would take in order to have a punishable criminal offense? As our world moves at a lightning-fast pace, the human element of familiarity that lays foundation to our social fabric of what is known and what is truth is being revolutionized with AI. Some for good and some for evil. No longer can we trust seeing is believing, or I heard it with my own ears, or even the sound of your own child's voice. The concept redefines and rewrites what the very meaning of familiarity means. I ask you, when your mother calls, are you going to hang up on her and call her back to make sure it's her? When your child calls in need of help, will you end the call and say, I don't believe it's really you? Is this our new normal? Is this a future we are creating by enabling the abuses of artificial intelligence without consequence and without regulation? I want to thank you for your time and attention today. Congress has a large and looming task ahead. How do we move forward as a community with this haunting reality that is plaguing us? If left uncontrolled, unregulated, and we are left unprotected without consequence, it will rewrite our understanding and perception of what is and what is not truth. It will erode our sense of familiar as it corrodes our confidence in what is real and what is not. This is a nonpartisan matter, and I've seen the hands reach across the aisle in unified concern. That gives me great hope. How to contain the ever-evolving artificial intelligence and its unknowns is not an easy task. My sincere thanks and humble appreciation for your time and attention today. I thank all of you, especially Senator Ossoff and the Senate at large, for tirelessly taking action to keep our community and our world safe from the hands of evil. I am one person, one story, but I'm not the only one, and I certainly will not be the last unless action is taken. I wish you Godspeed.
Thank you, Ms. DeStefano, for sharing your powerful and disturbing story, and we will, in more detail, investigate all of the issues you've raised. I appreciate it.